Gabriel is reportedly out for Arsenal between 1 to 2 months, and we, as FPL players, we need a replacement. So, who is the best Gabriel replacement right now in FPL? But before we get started, make sure you guys like this video because we are here to find the perfect Gabriel replacement today. And I'm going to start off by talking about two Arsenal players because I think a lot of people would think this is the easy move. Gabriel, an Arsenal defender, out, and let's just bring in another Arsenal defender in Timber, Saliba, or Calafiori, for example. But I'm going to ask a couple questions and I want people in the comments or people watching in this video just to think about it. Is Gabriel Arsenal's best defender? The answer to that question is probably yes. Is Gabriel Arsenal's biggest, let's say, leader at the back? The answer to that question is also yes, in my eyes. Do we expect Arsenal to be slightly worse defensively without Gabriel? Again, I think the answer to that question is yes. And listen, one thing I've said about Arsenal and about Arteta, I don't think personnel is the most important. I think Arsenal's defensive structure as a whole, Arteta has done an incredible job at setting up Arsenal. But at the same time, the better the personnel, the better defensively they're going to be, naturally. So, now that Gabriel is out, do I expect Arsenal's, let's say, clean sheet potential to fall? Slightly. But more importantly, I want to talk about these two players in particular, Timber and Saliba. And I actually think picking Saliba over Timber is probably the better idea if you want to go down the, let's say, Arsenal route as a replacement for Gabriel. But let's talk about Saliba. Is Saliba going to be a DEFCON monster like Gabriel was? The answer to that question is no. Is Saliba probably guaranteed 90 minutes during this busy Christmas period? Probably out of any single Arsenal defender, he has the biggest and, let's say, most assurance, let's say. But at the same time, we've seen when Saliba's missed a couple games so far this season, Mascara has also come in and done a fine job. But I still think, let's say, Saliba over this busy Christmas period, especially Gabriel out, he's probably going to be the mainstay in that back line. However, one thing I think that I have an issue with when it comes to Arsenal and let's say Timber in particular is Arsenal's fixtures over the next couple games are let's say the fixture schedule is very tight. And that's something I think when we're talking about replacements now, we have to think about. And also, regarding Saliba quickly, we also did see last year when Gabriel was out for a little bit, Saliba's goal for it did improve in terms of, I think he managed to get a couple goals. That's something that we have to keep a note of. But why did I say I want to go with Saliba over Timber, by the way? Because Timber, for me, has been the best FPL defender, bar, let's say, Gabriel this season. Timber's someone that I've, on this channel, said keep going for him, trust him. But I want to go to this screen here. FPL schedule. That's what I'm going to call this right here. And listen, shout out ABG7, I think his Twitter name is. I'm going to put the link down below who made this brilliant graphic. It is phenomenal. I saw FPL, why I use it. And listen, when I was listening to the pod, visualizing it, it was sensational. So shout the guy out. Look at Arsenal's fixtures over the next, let's say, game week 13 to 15 in particular. But I want to just talk about it a bit before. Between game week 12 and game week 13, Arsenal have a midweek game against Bayern Munich. That's a very tough game in the Champions League. After that, actually, let me explain this graphic first. Red is the gap between games and is less than 2 days of rest, if that makes sense. Yellow means they have 3 days of rest at least. Grey is obviously much bigger than that. And then black is only 1 day of rest. So, let's look at the gap between games for us. Bayern Munich, Chelsea, the gap is, let's say, 3 days. Tuesday to Sunday, I believe that is. Then it becomes Chelsea to Brentford. And this is what I want to talk about in particular. Chelsea to Brentford, the gap is only 2 days. The Arsenal only have 2 days rest. Again, Brentford to Aston Villa, the gap is only 2 days. Do we realistically expect Timber, let's say, to start all those games? I think the answer to that question is probably no. So we are saying Timber's going to start against Tottenham, start against Bayern Munich, start against Chelsea, start against Brentford, start against Aston Villa. 5 games in a row without Ben White, let's say, taking minutes off him, or let's say not starting. I think that's a very big ask, especially considering, let's say, this Christmas period. Also, we know centre-backs have a less demanding role than, let's say, full-backs, just in terms of the amount of running they do. The chances that Timber might need a rest, if the medical team says it, is going to be a lot higher than Saliba. So I think if you were going to pick an Arsenal defender to replace Gabriel with, I think it's better just to go with the safety net of Saliba, especially during this Christmas period. We know there's going to be a rotation. You want players that are safe for minutes. And in my eyes, Saliba is that. That's why I would say, if you're going with an Arsenal defender, go with Saliba over Timber for now. But there are other defenders that I want to discuss, so let's do that. Now, again, I want to discuss Manchester City because I think obviously over the next couple games in FPL, they're going to play a very, very important part when it comes to our decision making. And I think when we're looking at Gabriel replacements, we have to put these two defenders in that conversation. I want to start by talking about Gabriel. Listen, Gabriel, as we know, has been a brilliant FPL asset in the past for us over the years. However, in my personal opinion right now, at the price that he's at, 5.8 million, I would actually say I would avoid Gabriel. The reason I say that is, although Manchester City's minutes, or let's say fixtures look great, do I necessarily, again, trust Gabriel to start every single game over the Christmas period? The answer to that question is no. Also, if you guys are seeing Gavardiol's role at City right now, he's playing as a centre-back. So, the benefits of, let's say, him playing at centre-back right now, we know passing, that obviously, he's going to pass more at centre-back. That obviously helps with the bonus point system. But one thing that we used to love with Gavardio in the past, from an FPL point of view, was his ability to crash the box, for example, from left back. Brilliant shooting ability, brilliant aerial ability. That is something that we're obviously losing when he does play centre-back. And obviously, he's got a couple assists, for example, in the Champions League. But overall, his attacking potential does decrease. And you guys can see it with the numbers. And next year, 0.03. And expected assist numbers are 0.04. He's not really involved from, let's say, an attacking point of view, like how we usually expect Gavardio to be. And plus, his DEFCON numbers are not great. So that's why I would say I would rule Gavardio out if we're looking at our replacements for Gabriel. But someone that I really want to discuss is Nico O'Reilly. Because he's impressed me so much this season in terms of his actual ability on the football pitch, aside from FPL. But I think from an FPL point of view, we have to discuss it. Manchester City's last 8 games, he started 7 of them. The one game he didn't start was against Aston Villa. Manchester City lost. Also, it seems like Manchester City are now coming into a bit of form. It seems that finally, in let's say 2 years, Pep Guardiola seems to have found his settled 11, his best fullback pair. Mateus Nunes on the right-hand side, Nico O'Reilly on the left-hand side. And I think, listen, we always say how Manchester City's, or let's say Pep Guardiola's fullbacks are almost specialist positions. No one can really play them how Manchester City, or let's say the best plays that Manchester City can play them. And I think Nico O'Reilly's role at Manchester City is very interesting. Because obviously, he's a player that is naturally a midfielder, but he's playing left-back. Can he hold whip to a very good level? Yes. Can he also come inside? Yes. And that is something that obviously I think Manchester City and Pep Guardiola is really appreciating about Nico O'Reilly. And also we've seen it over the last couple of games. His ability to get forward, time his runs and get shots off, for example, has been very good. And I feel like there's not... I would say Nico O'Reilly also has the benefit of his physical capabilities. We're seeing, let's say, a more direct Premier League this year. Teams going longer more often. The physical battles are greater. And naturally, over the last couple of years, we've seen the physical levels of the Premier League be extremely high. Nico O'Reilly obviously benefits and helps Manchester City in that aspect. Another thing I want to say as well regarding Manchester City is the corner set piece routine. I've watched a lot of Manchester City over the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing a lot of their corners be, let's say, aimed at the front post when Erling Haaland making that darting run. And Erling Haaland is almost relying on the flick on, well, not relying on the flick on. Erling Haaland is the one who's trying to flick the ball on for people in the middle, such as Nico O'Reilly, to attack. So that's something I think we could see potentially becoming, let's say, a goal anytime soon, if that makes sense. A Haaland assist, a Nico O'Reilly, or someone else in that centre part of Manchester City scoring. But again, when it comes to Manchester City and let's say these assets, I want to talk about the schedule once again, because obviously that is very important. The reason why I want to say that is, first of all, when it comes to Nico O'Reilly, his biggest competition for his place is Ryan Aït-Nouri. We know Aït-Nouri is going to go to AFCON game week 16/70. So that obviously rules out, let's say, the biggest contender that can take Nico O'Reilly's place. But at the same time, Manchester City's fixtures are probably not as bad as, let's say, Arsenal's that I mentioned previously. For example, Manchester City have a very difficult game against Newcastle game week 12. Again, short turnover for the Champions League game. But again, against Leeds, which is their next Premier League game in game week 13, the Leeds-Fulham turnover, game week 13 to 14, is very small. But where Manchester City and Arsenal are a bit different is Manchester City have 1 day extra rest going from the game week 14 fixture to game week 15. So they play Leeds, Fulham on the Tuesday, then on the Saturday they play Sunderland. So that could potentially mean Nico O'Reilly might play all 3 games. Do I think that will happen? Probably not. Listen, It's Pep Roulette. It's Pep Guardiola. He has brilliant players at his disposal. But if you were going to go with a Nico O'Reilly over an Arsenal defender, you do have that, let's say, I'm not going to say assurance of minutes, but there's a bit more chance that Nico O'Reilly might play all 3 games. So that is obviously something that you guys have to take into consideration if you are thinking about buying Nico O'Reilly. But I am a very, very big fan of bringing in Nico O'Reilly to your FPL teams, and I would prefer him over Gavardio. Let's have a look at the final 2 players in this video. Now, the final 2 names I think can only be these 2 names when we're looking at, let's say, premium defenders to buy an FPL. Let's start with Liverpool and Virgil van Dijk, who, if you're looking at expected predicted points over the next couple games until game week 16, he's predicted the most. And listen, we know Virgil van Dijk, we know Liverpool, they haven't had the best of seasons, but at the same time, we know Virgil van Dijk, especially as I keep saying, over the Christmas period, you want 90-minute men. Virgil van Dijk has the assurance of minutes that he's going to play 90 minutes over all those games for Liverpool. He's going to start. Also, we have seen, let's say, a slight improvement in terms of Liverpool from a defensive point of view. Would I say I still trusted defense? The answer to that question is no. But have we seen they kept the clean sheet against Aston Villa, which was very good. They kept the clean sheet against Real Madrid, which is very impressive. Of course, they lost to Manchester City. But at the same time, Virgil van Dijk also has the benefit where we know he's a defender that's going to hit DEFCON. You guys can see it on the screen. DEFCON per 90, it comes out at 10.91, which is very, very good because you only need 10 to hit DEFCON for defenders. Also, Liverpool's fixtures, like we said before, are very, very good. They just can't get worse, can they? So I would say there is some sort, or let's say, I think probably Virgil van Dijk is going to be the most popular asset that people bring in as a Gabriel replacement. That's all I'm going to say on that. At the same time, listen, Konate is obviously a contender that a lot of people will have. But again, like I said, Konate's form, first of all, hasn't been the best this season. Also, during the Christmas period, do you trust Konate as a defender to stay fit throughout the entire period? The answer to that question is no. Which is why I'll probably avoid Konate for now. If you're going to go with a Liverpool defender, for me, it has to be Virgil van Dijk. And now, Daniel Munoz. Crystal Palace are such an interesting side because I feel like all the defenders are doing very, very well right now in FPL. And all defenders, let's say, people have eyes on. Whereas Munoz, Lacroix, Richards, Gray, there's so much interest in Crystal Palace. But again, like we know, Munoz is going to be, let's say, an attacking defender. He's not really going to hit DEFCON. Going forward, we know the impact that he can have. You guys can see the numbers on the screen. 0.08 XG per 90 so far this season. 0.16 expected assists per 90. But again, I want to go back to the schedule. Because in my personal opinion, and probably everyone's opinion, Crystal Palace have the worst set of fixtures, or let's say fixture schedule, out of any single side in the Premier League. We obviously know they're playing in the Conference League. Thursday, Sunday football, first of all, is very, very hard. We also can see in between game week 16 and game week 17, they're playing in the Conference League on a Thursday, but then they also have a Premier League game on the Saturday against Leeds. So that turnover, listen, we're going to see mass rotation. We know that. Hopefully, from an FPL point of view, it comes in the Conference League, which is what I would expect. But again, terrible, terrible turnover for Crystal Palace. But more importantly, again, Crystal Palace's turnover is just not good when it comes to Premier League games. They obviously have Wolves in game week 12. Then they have a bit of a rest until Thursday when they go play again in the Conference League. Then another 2-day rest when they play Manchester United. A 2-day rest, they play Burnley. Then a bit of a rest, 3 days, I think that is, against Fulham. Then again, they play in the Conference League. Then the league after having 2 days rest. And one thing we've realised is so far this season, Crystal Palace obviously have a smaller squad than a lot of the bigger sides in Europe. Also, we have seen some players, I'm not going to say complain at Glasner, but we saw Lacroix's comments the other day when he came out and said, listen, he might need a rest. So that is obviously something that we have to consider in terms of Crystal Palace don't have the biggest squad. They're going to be playing a lot of games. Could fatigue be a factor when it comes to us picking Crystal Palace players? I think that's a factor that within the FPL community, within, let's say, FPL content creators, we're not really speaking about. Fatigue naturally is going to be a factor. Crystal Palace just won't be able to maintain the level that we know Crystal Palace can play at just because they have so many games. So that is something that if you're going to pick Munoz, I think has to be something that people consider. But at the same time, we've seen it with Glasner so far. He's going to play Munoz in pretty much every game. We know Munoz's fitness levels, first of all, are very, very good. He's very durable as a player. But at the same time, there's not much other competition for his place. He's not really going to get a rest, which from an FPL point of view is great. But at the same time, it is interesting how Crystal Palace navigate this period because it is going to be very, very tough. But listen, that is my opinion on Munoz. I would probably say I would still look to buy him. I would still prefer Virgil van Dijk, but that's just my opinion on all 6 defenders I've discussed. You guys have to sell Gabriel now. He's injured for 1 to 2 months. There's just so many fixtures coming up right now in FPL. But listen, I spoke about the best Gabriel replacement. Let me know down below who you think the best replacement for Gabriel is. And listen, make sure you guys like the video, comment your thoughts on this video, and subscribe to the channel.